No matter how high-tech, highfalutin, lazy, or foo-foo America gets, we will never stop hunting and fishing. This is The Hunting Quest.
The Hunting Quest.
We take 1 hour of every week and talk about our favorite things in the world, hunting and fishing. You'll get tips and help on the fishing environment locally in the DMV area. Plus, we're going to have fun along the way. This is The Hunting Quest. And now your hosts, Mike Tippin and Mark Davis.
We go. All right. So, welcome to the very second,
second,
something
first
like that.
live one,
first live
podcast.
So,
First one you'll be able to find easily on the internet.
yeah, hope so. Anyway,
Yeah, ideally you should be able to watch this one. Well, I don't know how people are going to watch this one live since we don't really advertise it that much, but this is our first live podcast that's going to be on YouTube, I think, initially.
I hope
Correct?
so. Yeah, that's what I'm working on.
And then after that, we'll have it on some different platforms here. But we've had a lot of time to plan, a lot of time to hype ourselves up and get the proper equipment and figure things out. So it's changed a lot since the very first one we recorded, but this one sounds much better.
Yeah, we've gone from we've kind of gone from a whole little to a whole lot in a very quick amount of time, and I think it's kind of cool. You know, it's definitely a learning curve. So
Yeah, live from the Davis Guns and Goose studio.
absolutely, this is cool though. So
Yeah, so we'll just jump into it today. I guess we'll go ahead and talk about anything that's new or common or anything going on in the world of fishing.
Yeah.
First off, to think about it, we went fishing this weekend.
I heard.
Went down to went to Ocean City going on a shark fishing trip. So that's always interesting. A lot of times those are really gimmicky kind of things that you hear.
Yeah.
So we went out with a captain, and he was very, very professional. This was a legit operation. So a lot of times you got there with really low expectations, but we got there. They had the right gear and the right idea and the right equipment. And I thought this would be a really fun time. We're gonna sit out there and chum. We were in some balloons, so some top water and some bottom water.
Balloon fishing's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And right off of Assateague.
Oh, that's that's even better.
Yeah, we could maybe a couple 100 yards off, so you could actually see the ponies running back and forth, which was really neat.
You know, I've never seen that.
Oh, really?
Not once.
Yeah, they just look like regular horses, but I guess they're wild.
Yeah.
I see all the
not
signs when you don't get 40 feet from the horses because they'll bite your fingers off or something. I don't know. But we were out there fishing, and it was really neat. Like I said, watching those, and there was an air show at Ocean City. So they were doing that over, which was really, really neat. So there was all this stuff to watch because we weren't catching any sharks the whole time. So what ended up happening was we went out, really good weather, really good location. Everything was perfect. I mean, it was like one of those perfect days. Couldn't have been any better. We even found parking when we got in Ocean City, which is a whole other nightmare in itself. And we got out there. Good team. Everything's exciting. Boat's nice. And a pot of dolphins shows up.
And you're shark fishing.
And we're swimming around, and they're swimming around. And we're okay, that's kind of cool. And they leave. And we're like, okay, so we're talking, and the mate's chumming the whole time. And he goes, man, this chum's just not moving. It's just sitting vertically right here. The tide's slack.
Oh,
So we have no chum line. We have chum, but no line. It's not going. It's not going all the way to the beach, which is what we're hoping to pull them off the beach, pull them up.
right.
So the whole time we're sitting there, and there's just nothing going on, and these dolphins just keep showing up.
They're cool to watch, though.
I don't think I've ever seen that many pods of dolphins in my entire life at one place. We sat there off the coast for it was like 4 hours. 4 hours. I think we probably saw like 120 dolphins, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
That's insane.
So yeah, I've never seen that many before. I don't know what it was.
And this was this past Saturday, right?
Yeah, really good weather. Everything was great, but yeah, we just couldn't catch them.
It sucks. Just so you know, we had our whole Saturday planned to go do really cool stuff, and then we're looking at the weather, and it's like, oh, it's going to be torrential downpour. It's going to be horrible weather. It's like, all right, cool, no problem. And then I'm kind of doing my thing. I'm like, all right, this is kind of cool, but, we're planning for this gigantic weather storm to come in. And I was thinking about y'all the whole time. I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, they are just going to get drenched. Not a drop. Not a freaking drop.
We
anywhere.
literally watched it go by. So it went. The storm went so we're adjacent from the peninsula. You know, like the whole eastern coast peninsula.
Yeah.
And it just went right up and drenched the whole thing, and we never got wet at all. I mean, it barely had a little bit of a sprinkle.
Dude, that's crazy.
It went over. So yeah, other than not catching fish, it was a wonderful day. But
That's cool.
I mean, we caught a clear nose skate.
Yeah.
And
Those
that
are
was-
cool.
That was it. They're
Those
cool.
are really cool.
Yeah, they're neat. I mean, people don't understand that, because it was here of a skate.
Yeah.
So they think a skate and a stingray.
Well-
They think of all those things being the same thing.
We'll describe a clear nose skate. Maybe people don't know what it is.
Well, I think the big difference is people don't understand the difference between a ray
Right.
and a skate. So a ray is a different fish essentially. So it has a long little narrow tail with a barb at the end, and it picks that barb up and
Sure.
stabs you with it, like the
Stabs you.
Irwin,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And then a skate is more of a same kind of thing. It's a bottom dwelling, shark like ray thing, but it doesn't have that barb or that shape. It's a little bit different. It has spikes all over the back of it.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So it's a little different. I think it kind of flails its tail around in
Yeah.
a defense. But clear nose, it actually comes to a point and the nose is clear.
That's cool.
Translucent, you can see right through it.
That's
and
pretty slick.
that's one of the ones they say I think is actually better to eat.
I don't think I'd eat a skate.
Well, it goes back to the whole story of bay scallops and then sea scallops, and that bay scallops are a certain type of ray or skate or whatever.
Right.
So when I grew up down in Southern Maryland, there were a lot of things, but mainly what you would catch was cow nose rays during the cow nose ray season, which is most of the summer.
Sure.
That meat is not scallopy looking at all. It's this red, weird tendony meat, and it's just not. I can't imagine that you could ever get it to look white like
Right.
a scallop or taste like a scallop. But supposedly, I think it's one of those rays or one of those skates that tastes really good. But, I mean, not.
I'm not
not
gonna
well,
try it.
it's it's really funny when we talk about seafood in general. I always said, how hungry was the first guy to eat a crab?
Yeah.
Like, how much was that guy
What did it
starving?
take to get him to that
Yeah,
point?
when he came up the they came up to Potomac or whatever years ago, and they were or
You know, that
Jamestown
looks
or
like a tasty
yeah,
morsel.
look at that. I want to eat that giant water spider looking thing. I just can't imagine how much you had to be starving to eat those. Or oysters.
God.
Who wanted to eat an oyster the first time they saw it? I can't imagine like how that actually.
We
comes
thought it
to
was a
be.
good idea to shuck an oyster, kind of dig in there.
Yeah, I'm
and,
just
you
gonna
know,
swallow that whole thing
cool. Just
raw.
raw.
Yeah, I just can't. I can't exactly imagine that. So, all those things that people say they taste good are weird to me.
Right.
Snakehead, that's a really good example. We
you
started,
say this.
we started catching them years ago. Probably when I was like in high school. I remember we'd start catching them, and they're a slimier fish. A weird looking fish. It
Right.
does look like a snake. It's pretty in the same way though. If you can admire the pattern of a snake,
Right.
you can admire the pattern of a snakehead, and people are like, "Oh, it's delicious. It's the best fish you'll ever eat." That's why they're here. They brought them over from foreign countries to, eat them. They're a delicacy. And you look at this thing and you go, I don't know about that. And you flay it open and it's beautiful white meat. The whole thing is this big hunk of white meat, and then you eat it. And it's one. Well, first, you got to tell yourself to eat it. Not just eat it's going to be good.
Yeah.
And then you eat it, and it is. It's literally like one of the best things. I can't even describe it. It's white and flaky, but it's still dense. It's
Again, how hungry do you have to be to say, I'm going to try to eat that?
well, if you think of fish in general, we don't have a ton of like air breather fish like that.
Sure.
Like we have like bowfin and things of that nature.
Right, right,
and this not even so much in this area we would have a lot of bowfin. We have some, but over in Asia there's a lot of air breathers.
Yeah.
So a snakehead wouldn't necessarily look like a weird fish to them, and even like in the Amazon they have a lot of air breathers.
Right.
Because it's so not tidal but flood basin wise.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they get stuck in these ponds where there's no oxygen. Looking like an aripana. I mean that is a giant snakehead type of
thing
fish.
is so
same
cool.
kind of body, same kind of thing. It
My
is
favorite
an air
fish on the
breather.
planet.
Oh, they're amazing. They're phenomenal looking fish. So really, for us to look at those in the North American market, yeah, that's probably a weird looking fish. But if you were from Asia or the Amazon,
Not so
probably
much.
wouldn't be that different looking than a fish would be that you would see there. So,
Right.
and I've always wondered that too, and if they've ever done a study of bowfin population because they look similar to a snakehead.
Yeah.
If you didn't know the difference, then it would easily look like the same
Well,
fish.
yeah.
And I wonder if their numbers have gone down over the years. People are like, oh, this is a snakehead. I'm going to kill this thing.
Yeah. Well, I know that, the Virginia Department of Wildlife, they were talking about that. They were trying to make a big effort to say, hey, look, we, this is the difference. Know the difference. Don't go out and be an idiot. Not that you're really going to find a lot of bowfin around here anyway, but it is there, right? So I think they're probably going to do something worthwhile. They're probably going to, I would assume that they've taken some numbers on that, but I guess the only real way is go ask the Department of Wildlife Resources.
It's funny. It's one of those things where if you look at those fish in a picture, they
Right.
look similar. If you look at them as an idea, they look similar.
Sure.
If you didn't see a snakehead or a bowfin and you caught one or the other, they look similar.
Right.
If I had a snakehead in my hand and I had a bowfin in my hand, you would not think they were the same fish. Whatsoever. They have the same shape, but they don't look the same. A bowfin, its eyes are more towards the side of its head.
Right.
Snakehead's a little more towards the top. The
So they're
colors,
apex
the
predator, right?
well, they hunt from the bottom.
Yeah.
So the shape is similar,
Right.
but different. And that goes back to a discussion we had not too long ago about Virginia talking about the invasive species, talking about smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, Alabama bass,
Yep.
and then
Which we didn't know was an invasive species.
so didn't even know there was a difference. And then they also start to talk about warmouth. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so that looks like that bluegill smallmouth had a baby. People will send you pictures of those all the time and ask you what kind of weird hybrid fish they catch. You didn't catch a hybrid fish; you caught a normal fish.
Right. Invasive species, that is, though.
That's not.
Oh, no.
no. The only one is the Alabama bass.
All right.
So,
Well, and the snakeheads, but
well, I'm talking about bass wise.
Yeah,
So when we look at well, then if we go to space, we'll start doing all the catfish. And that's a whole.
that
nother-
is a whole.
nother
That could be a whole
episode.
podcast right there.
Yeah, pretty much. Which we probably should discuss one time. But
Yeah.
the Alabama bass, if you look at a picture next to and I don't know if they thought about this a lot, but even in the catalog, I'm actually looking at it right now. What is this? This is
Who's that?
Virginia's Freshwater and Boating.
Oh, that's the one put out for
This is-
Department of Wildlife. And,
Yeah, DWR's
yeah.
magazine for the year. It's just the fishing one.
Yeah.
They actually have on page 45 talking about the invasive species as far as the bass go.
Right.
And they have an Alabama bass, some largemouth bass, a smallmouth bass. They don't look that different in the picture.
Right.
The largemouth and Alabama bass. I wouldn't know how to tell the difference. One looks lighter to me.
Right. I see the little dotted stripe down the side on the Alabama bass that's very definitive.
But in this
but-
picture, they
right.
don't look drastically different. It almost looks like when you catch a bass out of two different ponds.
Yeah.
One where maybe it's a different cycle where one's a lot darker. You ever
Sure.
catch a really dark fish
Oh,
and you
yeah.
catch a really
yeah,
light
yeah.
fish?
Yeah.
To me, that looks like the difference in the pictures. But when we've seen other pictures where people had two in the hand,
Yeah.
well, one in each hand,
Vastly
they
different.
look way different compared to each other. So yeah, I don't know, and they don't really explain to you too much about what is the difference between the Alabama bass versus the largemouth bass. It
Right.
looks like maybe it's some kind of weird hybrid. It looks just like a largemouth bass. So I don't know. It gets really complicated. I would hate to be the guy who out there thinks I know what I'm doing and I'm out there killing all these beautiful largemouth bass
Right.
that aren't the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and they don't, I don't know.
Good conversation to have with
And we really need to see maybe we actually get a,
DWR on.
maybe
Yeah,
some for
that'd be
WR,
cool.
or maybe like a biologist to explain the real difference or why, what makes them, not what makes them invasive, what
Yeah,
makes them
but-
invasive not being here, but what makes them a danger to your environment.
Absolutely. And we talked about it with the catfish too, but again, catfish are essentially invasive. Invasive, not evasive. So
I think I'd have to look it up because I haven't looked in a while, but there was a whole big thing about the blue catfish and about how they had been introduced to do something, and
right.
the numbers in the Patuxent and the Potomac grew so fast that
Yeah.
it was overwhelming.
Those things will live off of anything. I mean, they're the cockroaches of the freaking ocean, or of the water.
I never realized how many there were
Yeah.
until I saw pictures where guys were scuba diving on like
Yep.
dams.
The
And
size
then-
of Volkswagens.
But then they would also have the smaller fish.
Oh yeah.
But there was like thousands of them, just like not schooling, but just sitting on these ledges.
Yeah.
And it was amazing how many catfish are. It's like when you go somewhere like Lake Anna
Yeah.
and you're out there fishing and you're catfish, and catfish, and catfish, and catfish, and catfish. And you think to yourself, like, well, there must be a lot of catfish. You have no idea how many catfish there are under there.
That's less than 1% of what you're catching is less than 1%.
Yeah, I mean it's remarkable
Oh yeah.
how little people understand, what's under there, how much that is, and for something to be sustainable. And that's another thing too. When you talk about these invasive species, it's incredible that they actually get a foothold.
Yeah.
Because to stock, that's another good example is Lake Anna. They were talking about the program to get the striped bass in there. How many striped bass they had to introduce every year and over and over and over and over. And it's a ridiculous amount.
Oh yeah.
The programs that they did in Virginia for the tiger muskie, stocked and stocked and stocked and stocked and stocked. I think it's back down now every year. It's not as much as it used to be.
Right.
But it took so much. And that wasn't to bring an invasive species in. That was to take a species that had lost its footing to bring it back up.
Right.
But there's always a cause and effect.
Well, if it's, I guess that we probably need to look in a definition aspect here. But when you're looking at invasive species, obviously muskie is if it's already here, does that make it an invasive species, or are we just fixing? So this is repopulating?
So this is what I'll put a notation on this when I say this. This could be completely wrong. The next words that come out of my mouth could be completely wrong. And next week I'm actually going muskie fishing with the guide, and he's really in the know with all that stuff. But I'll ask him about this. But I believe that the tiger muskie is a combination of northern pike and like a northern muskie.
Okay.
And it makes for a more aggressive muskie. So that's what they wanted the tiger muskie for, was they were more aggressive.
Great.
So they could grow better. But the idea was
was
to have them in the environment. But I could be completely wrong. But I think it was something like that. But I'll find some clarification on that and figure out what that is.
Well, a muskie guy.
I do know a really good muskie guy. We guys should probably call him up one day and get him on here because he's really, really knowledgeable about that. Yeah, that's a whole other fish of itself there. I mean, they're incredible.
They are.
You go out there and you fish for them all day. And this kind of goes back to the catfish thing. We fish all day, have some chase, maybe catch one, maybe don't. The best day ever, you're probably going to catch 4, if you're lucky. But that if you're having a couple follow over, if you suck the water out of that river, like the James, how many muskie have to be in that thing for you to get chases like you get? There's got to be tons of them. I mean, just tons and tons and tons.
Yeah.
But they're just a whole other beast. They don't hit stuff. They don't whatever. And they were also telling me, and I didn't know this. They go to the parks, like the farms where they catch trout. Not where they catch trout, where they raise trout.
Yeah.
And they live line trout. They float them.
Really?
To catch tiger muskie in the river. So they have all that pressure of lure fishing and being fished with live bait.
Right.
So
can't be easy.
Becomes tougher. Who knows? Every time they bite something,
that's a tough fish no matter what.
Ripped out of the water.
Yeah.
So I didn't know they did that until I saw some guys doing that. I saw them floating stuff, and I was like, "What do they float?" And he said, "They go over and they keep the receipt because they can't. You can't catch a trout and use it as bait, so it's got to come from the farm." They go, they buy it, and then they just float them. They just put a float on them, run it out there, and they wait for the muskie to hit them.
That's crazy.
So, I didn't know there was a lot of live bait fishing.
I had no idea.
Until I saw that. So, they're constantly being stressed in those rivers. I don't think that many people keep them.
Right, no. So it's a once-in-a-lifetime fish. I mean...
Yeah, if you don't target them, you're lucky to ever catch one at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're just out there fishing around. If you can target them, too, and never catch one either, for that matter. I
can tell you what's funny. It's a funny story. So it was me and my son. We decided we were going to go float down the river, right? And we're in these tubes. Everything's great. Life is good. We're having a good time. Start seeing the clouds kind of come over, and we're like, all right, it's gonna start going. So we were paddling over towards the shore, and we found this nice little spot, and there some guys that are over there fishing, right? And there's a stream that kind of comes out right where we're at, and pull our tubes out, and off we go, and we're waiting and it just torrential downpour. And the first 3 or 4 drops that hit, this guy who's fishing pulls in this fish, and it's a freaking muskie. Had no idea what he had. He wasn't trying to fish for a muskie. He didn't have a leader on, nothing. And here's this guy who catches a muskie and is like, oh, what is that? And he's reaching down to get the muskie. And I'm like, you probably don't want to do that. And the guy didn't speak any English at all. And I'm like, no. So he looks down and I mean, here's this guy who caught a muskie just sitting on this little cold stream that was feeding into the river. And I'm like, had no clue. I'm like, once in a lifetime deal right there. You have no idea how lucky you just got. I mean, I know of somebody who's been trying for 4 years to catch him.
There's guys that come to the store every so often. And there's one guy who comes in quite often, and he tells me, "Oh, I catch muskie from the shore all the time." Yeah, okay, whatever. Sure you do. You know, whatever. Then he starts showing me pictures. And I swear, like once a month, he goes out there and he's just fishing and fishing and fishing. And from the shore, he just randomly catches these muskie over there, up by the dams up at Shepherdstown. And I just don't understand how he does it. It's just a luck of a draw. I mean, I've sat up there and seen him sitting there, like in the spillways, but they're not hitting anything. You throw everything at him all day. But this guy just, they catch them. So
He's holding his mouth the right way. That's all you can think of.
Luck of the draw kind of thing. Maybe. I mean, there's certain times they're not going to hit. The water gets too warm, they're not going to hit. The water's too shallow, they're not going to hit.
Sure.
I was just talking to the guy that I fish with, and he was saying that we could go at night. A couple hours into the evening, maybe try that if we really didn't have a lot of luck. And I said, I didn't know that they really hunt at night. I don't know. And he said during the summertime when it gets too hot, they actually just go nocturnal.
Really?
Yeah. So he says, so
That makes sense.
They'll go ahead and wait, save all their energy all day. And then when nighttime comes, when the water's really clear,
Right.
they'll hit. If the water's not clear, they don't have as much luck.
Right.
If the water's clear, and I guess all they probably do is sit at the bottom and just look up, see the reflection.
All right. Yep.
You're kind of like when you're plugging in the ocean, you're just looking for, because that's people talk about that sometimes. Like, oh, when you use a plug when you're fishing at night, what color do you use? And I'm like, black. And they're like, why would you use black? And I'm like, because you want the crispest, that you can get from the light coming down.
Absolutely.
And people are like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, well, they don't see color at night. They're just looking below, just trying to grab it. So yeah, it's really interesting. All those fish are weird, You never know, but that's the fun of it. I mean, we could all go out there with beetle spins and catch a bluegill and perch and stuff like
That's
that.
the greatest thing in the world, my friend.
I mean, that's one game of it. But at the end of the day, every so often you want to go, catch something different. And
it's funny because my brother and I were kind of having this conversation, and he's big sport fisherman, big time, deep sea sports fisherman, offshore. If it's got salt, he's probably fishing it, right? And it's cool and it's slick, and he loves the fact that when something hits, you have no idea what it is.
That's a saltwater fun.
Yeah,
a lot of mystery.
Yeah, I am completely different, and what I look at is I go out to target a specific species, mainly largemouth, smallmouth, right? Unless I'm going to, Brooks or something like that, right? I'm largemouth, smallmouth, cool. So I go out with prepared to do that. Now, what's different is like my wife, completely different. She will put a worm on a hook on a bobber and sit out there and read her book and be completely happy to sit in her kayak, and whatever comes along, she catches. She's good with that. And to me, that's the fun, right? I'm targeting a very specific species and I'm catching them, right? But, like you said, the beetle spins, I think that if somebody's trying to get into fishing and they want to get into fishing, the cork and bobber is kind of cool, but it gets old real quick, like really, really quick. So how do you fix that? Give them something to do, give a kid something to do, reel it in, and that's where beetle spins, I think, shine. Beetle spins are the way to go. You catch anything on a beetle spin.
So I think that's a misconception of fishing. So people a lot of times will say, oh, I don't like to fish. No, I don't like to fish. Well, fishing's boring. That's why it can be boring. It depends on how you're going to do it. And for example, like when I was young, that's what we did. We bought some worms and we threw it out there. And you're kind of, and I don't want to say doomed. Doom's not the right word, but you become complacent. I don't know. You're only going to catch so many things on a worm and a bobber. Yep. Like you're not going to, the odds of you pulling out a 15-pound record bass, it's not going to happen. It just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't happen until it does.
You're right. It could, but
the odds are very, very small.
Yeah, really not like that. You're going to catch some bluegill. Right. And people say, oh, this is really boring, or oh, that pond doesn't have anything in there. I fished it for years, and you hear all these things all the time. And I tell people, I said, you're not necessarily fishing the way you should. And lucky for me, so my father fished when I was a kid,
Right.
but he was really limited to it. And to be completely honest with you, he likes it, but I don't think he necessarily likes it near as much as I did.
Right.
To me, it was really the excitement of what am I pulling out of the water? What is
Yep.
it? What did I catch? What is this going to be neat? And then I like to look at fish too. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
always thought it was neat to hold it because
Oh, absolutely.
unless you catch a fishing, they're not going to swim up and you're picking it up.
No.
You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So when I was really young, my dad had this little rowboat, and we used to go out, little like I don't know, like 12-foot aluminum boat with a little tiller steer motor.
Yep.
And we'd go out, we'd fish. And we used to go out there and fish with bloodworm, and we would catch a bunch of croaker and spot and white perch and whatever was out there. And the same thing after a while, it's kind of, oh yeah, caught a bunch of croaker, caught a bunch of croaker. And it's still fun, but you're
Yep.
just catching the same fish over and over and over, and you're reeling it in, and that was that. And we caught them for fun, but we also caught them for substance. We ate them.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember we came back to the pier one day. There was this old man talking, and this is hell, I was probably like 10 years old, if even that old. And he was like, "Well, what you want to do is you take these," and he held his hand up and he said, "You want to go out and you fish these, and you'll catch yourself some fish around the pier and stuff." This is what my dad's like getting ready. So when he'd hit me, and not knowing at the time, and now knowing, he handed me shad darts, little shad darts.
Oh, yeah.
And they were
Yeah.
ones that he probably made at home. They were very, very basic. They were white with a little bit of tail on them. And he said you just take it and you just twitch it around in the water. So sure enough, with those piers when I was a kid, I twitched around and I'd catch these white perch. And to me, that was amazing. Because to me, there was a value.
Oh, yeah.
And not just throwing the bait, but mimicking something and having it bite something that's not live. It believes it is. I've convinced it to do it. And to me, that was where fishing started.
Sure.
So then at that point, I still didn't know how to fish. I didn't know how to fish, but I would use these little jigs. And then my father, with what he did fish when young, was he would fish like meps. So he was like, "Here, use these meps." So then I learned, wait, I just throw this out there and I crank it back and I catch fish. But then a lot of people kind of stop there. Like, okay, well, hey, I caught fish, that's how I did it. But my question now was, why is this catching a fish? Why is
Yep.
this piece of metal catching a fish? And then I realized when you watch fish in the water, you don't see the fish, you see the flash.
Yeah, exactly.
As it swims away. And this is mimicking the flash. So then I said, okay, well, if this is mimicking the flash, what do these other lures do to mimic things? And that was how I got into fishing with lures.
Yep.
And that's how it became, fun to me to figure out what kind of strikes you're having while you're having it. And then when you get to that point, you can, so even saltwater fishing, we used to go out and we'd fish a lot off like the big piers, or we'd go fish out the beach, like surf fishing. Well, not really surf fishing because it's not the ocean, but, similar in like bay surf fishing, we'll call it.
Yeah.
And we'd go out there and throw it. But if I was on a pier, I would throw my 2 big lines with whatever on there. And a lot of times I'd throw bait, but a lot of times I'd just chunk like a whole live fish over the side. See what I catch, catch like usually big rays or some stuff. But the whole time I would do it, I was still jigging other stuff.
Right.
Like I take like a gotcha plug and just jig vertically the whole time because I was bored. I didn't want to just sit there the whole time.
Yep.
I just jig. And nothing was funnier than to go to these big piers at night, because I always come later. I get there at like, at 10 o'clock when it's been dark. And all these older guys are all set up, and I come up and I set my stuff up and I throw it out, maybe me and a couple buddies. And the next thing I do is I take my small rod and I start jigging with a gotcha plug. And 10 minutes into it, I catch some striper that's hanging around the pier feeding. And everyone's looking at me first off, angry as could be because I actually caught something and catch that all day. And then immediately it goes from anger to how did you catch that?
Of
What
course.
did you use? What are you using?
Yeah.
And I show them, and they're just like, well,
How does that work?
Well, where do you put the bait on that? I don't understand it. And I'm like, no, you just
jig it.
jig it around. And they're like, but what's it do? I was like, the movement, it mimics fish swimming, and they feel like the fish want to eat it.
Right.
They want to see what it is. And they don't comprehend that. But to me,
Right.
that's the difference between fishing and then that next step of fishing.
Yeah.
Which is where you're trying to use lures to mimic
Right.
fish activity to get them to bite. And to me, that's the fun of fishing.
Exactly. And that, yeah, I find the same interest in that, whether it's, are we doing this because here's a, this is mimicking another bait fish, or is this, like you look at bass, they're cichlids, right? They're very territorial, very aggressive fish. So when you take that as, when you're looking at it from that perspective, you say, okay, here's this fish. Is he being territorial? Is he being, protective, or she being protective of, the eggs, or, because they're, on the beds or whatever? What's going to drive it at that particular time? And is it just going to be something that's going to piss them off, and then they're just going to beat the snot out of them? I mean, I'm a topwater guy. I love it. I absolutely love topwater lure. I wish I could fish them all year round, but you can't. So to me, figuring that part out, do you have aggressive bass in a lake? Do you have, more sluggish bass? Is there a thermocline that you have to fish through and you have aggressive bass on on the top and, a little less aggressive bass on the bottom, or, what are you after? And
Well, it's funny because people don't necessarily think that same thought process too. So a lot of times they just think it's feeding because it's hungry and it wants to eat.
right.
And especially when you're fishing after some stuff where it follows and then leaves.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes it's not even hungry.
Agreed.
Sometimes it's literally just following,
just-
just to watch.
Yeah.
It's just following.
Yep.
Now, if that continues to happen all day, they are trying to feed, but for something's going on that's making your food not,
Right.
making your lure not go.
Absolutely.
But people also understand too, and I'm afraid, and yet again, I don't have a degree in biology, more or less marine biology, so I can be completely wrong. But things like rattle traps,
Yeah.
extremely loud, lipless thing. It's making noise. My belief's always been that they're biting that not because they want to, because they think it's food.
Ah.
They're biting because it's annoying them.
Oh yeah.
So
They're pissed.
I've always thought that thing going by them is just making them crazy.
Yeah.
And I've run a rattle trap, especially nothing's better than sight fish when you can see them. And you crank it by 2 or 3 times, but the third time he just smashes at full speed and you get him.
And it's never like a slug bite, like a sluggish bite. It's always just monstrous on those lipless.
Well, it's like soft plastic. It's like when you watch like a worm hit, and it's like they just kind of suck it in and sit there. But when something swims by, they hit it with so much more force.
Oh, yeah.
And for years I didn't use these soft plastics because I didn't really know how to.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I didn't grasp.
I thought I did.
I didn't realize that there's a lot of finesse in it.
Yeah.
And I hate to use the word finesse because everybody's using finesse rigs, finesse this, finesse that. But I literally mean in the term of it's just finesse, just tapping it slow and getting it to look, I guess, trying to get it to be believable. And then all of a sudden you'd sit there and I would get hits and I would think I was snagged.
Oh yeah.
Because they just grabbed it, they held it.
Yep.
And then the next thing I know, I get a
You
little
yank
tension
it
and I
and-
yank it, he starts going. But I also, sometimes I'm probably yanking right out of his mouth
Yep.
because he's not seated on it yet. So it's really weird that they do bite things different. They have different, the temperature's different. The time of year is different. They're sitting on beds. Are they biting because they're hungry? Are they biting because they're mad? Are they doing things that are just strange behavior for the day? And it gets really, really tricky. And that's, I think, part of the sport,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
of fishing in general. It's probably not so much of a sport where people are like, oh, you're out there exhausted doing it all day long, which there are times that happens. But no, it's more of a sport because it's you're learning the finesse and the idea. You really got to do a lot of research to really understand what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. And I like the idea, and again, when you're a kid growing up, and you get lures, like your first lure, or you stole your granddad's lures or something like that, and you knew you weren't supposed to. But worms were always that one where you thought, oh yeah, I just throw it out there and jig it in, and maybe you catch something, maybe you don't. And then when you watch some of these folks that are true, professional fishermen, and they're throwing a worm, and they're just getting killed. Just every toss, it's just one after another, and they figured it out. They know how to, lack of a better term, finesse the rigs. But whether it's a wacky rig or whatever, which I think is cool. I've just kind of gotten into really fishing the wacky rigs, and I think it's cool. And I think when those guys go through and you're hitting they're hitting hard on the wacky rigs, they come in hard. They don't really kind of suck it up. They kind of a little bit harder hit to it. Whereas if you're kind of catching it and you're just kind of jumping off the bottom up and down, you get a different hit out of it, and that's that mushy hit, But I don't know. I've enjoyed fishing, and I've enjoyed the capability that you have with you open up a tackle box and say what's going to work. You have no idea. And it there's so many different things that you have to take into account. You take into account whether it's going to be a hot day, whether it's going to be a cold day, whether it's going to be a murky water. Did it rain the day before? What time of year is it? Are they on bed? Are they hitting top water? Are they? All of those things kind of start playing through your brain. And for me, I'm trying to work through it, right? And like the other day, we were fishing in this local pond, and I love this little pond. It's kind of like our go-to, work out the bugs first of the year. You're going to catch something. You just got to kind of figure it out, right? So I'm kind of doing my thing, and there's this little tarp looking deal that they have out there, and I threw one of those jammers up there, and it hit the tarp, hit the top of the tarp, and then slid off. Legit, 2 seconds after it hit the water, and monster bass just kind of came onto it, and then, it was a good fight from that point forward. But it's amazing. Again, simulating. You're simulating something that fell into the water, whether it's a frog or it's a tree or whatever it is. And I found the same thing. Like I used to hate, those plastic frogs that everybody fished with and swore by them. I could never catch
like hollow body.
Oh yeah. I could never catch anything off of them ever. And I mean, I'm fishing right next to people who are just destroying them. And I'm like, this is insane. I hate this. This is the worst ever. So you work on it, and then you start to realize you're fishing with it wrong, completely wrong. You can look like you're doing everything right, but you're doing it completely wrong.
Well, they're almost damn near impossible to fish with this, or using like a bait caster.
Yeah,
speed wise, because you've really got to get.
You really got to get them across.
Because I remember buying those when I was a kid and using spinning reels, and I couldn't get the action out of them.
Right,
they just wouldn't work the way I wanted them to, or I was literally cranking it so fast.
Yeah.
That it was just skating across the top. And that's why I learned. I was like, this is the bait caster advantage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I tried to do that with my wife. Try to show her topwater rigs, and she's an open face reel. She calls them flipping flings. But she gets out there and she'll throw lures, and it's taken a lot to get her to the lure part. She does really well with it, and don't tell her that. She'll I'll never live it down. But I was trying to show her basically kind of how to walk a lure back and forth on an open face reel. You either got to be really good, or that lure's got to be just perfect, because you can't do it with a frog. I mean, a good topwater lure, you can do it, but it's hard. It's really, really hard. And you're right, with a bait caster, it's on. It's on.
Well, you see, like bass,
and the rods,
bass competition. That's exactly what I say. So you look at a bass competition, and they'll have bass boat. I don't know what the regulations are. They'll have like 22 rods on the boat, and a lot of that to me is of course going to be overkill, or it's just rigged so they can quickly get through it. And I can understand that.
It's money. So,
but I do have some rods, and I have some that are set up for different things, and I do have I have topwater one. So
you set me up a topwater rig.
And I don't remember what this ratio was, but it was faster. It's much faster.
8-to-1 probably.
And I wish I had it with me. But it's faster, the rod's a little bit longer, and it's a little bit stouter than my average. And it's got a heavy braid on it. It's like a 60-pound braid. Not because I'm going to catch 6-pound bass, but because I'm going to get stuck in weeds every time I check it out there, and I can yank it out and I can muscle it out.
Right.
And then my other rods that I use are basically the same. They're usually Revo reels, these Live Garcia Revos. Same setup, reel-wise. Speed's the same. But speed will be slower. Reel will be the same, and a lighter line. But that's a good example of where you do have a drastic difference,
right?
In the rod and combo setup for doing different things. I find though that, to be completely honest with you, I can pretty much do most things with a medium heavy rod. That's a fast action.
I like medium heavy with fast action. That's a go-to.
7-footish. Yeah. I can pretty much do
anything I need.
Just about most of what I need.
Except for muskie.
There's some other. Oh yeah. So we get into the muskie. I spent quite some money into the muskie gear. You're talking 8-foot rod with super super heavy. I mean, because you're throwing half pound lures. All day easily, and I mean something bigger than that, and you're chucking them back and forth and doing figure 8, running through the water, and then you want to have that line in case it does take drag from you, which it doesn't really tend to, but you want to have that ability. So that'll wear you out. You talk about getting tired. Yeah. I mean, heaving that thing all day long.
We talked about that. Yeah, that's insane, man. I mean, good on you that you do it. I don't know that I would. I mean, obviously, one day, I want to be able to sit down and say, yeah, I went fishing. I've caught a muskie. It was completely by accident. My friend in North Dakota, we were fishing in Minnesota. He took me fishing. We caught one. He hated me for the rest of the fishing trip.
For the rest of your life.
Yeah. I wonder if he still. He hadn't talked to me in a while, but no. But I get it. So checking that one off my list was cool, but that wasn't meant to be that way. But
Well, ideally you always want it to be that way. You're gonna go out with that guide, and he's gonna put you on that 44-inch fish,
Yep.
and it's gonna be perfect, and you're gonna do that picture, and
yep,
you're gonna have it, and you're gonna remember it. And it was 2 hours into the trip, and the rest of the day you just laughed and had fun and caught some smaller fish and didn't care.
yep.
But that's not truth with any fishing for the most part, especially not for those kind of things.
It's not the same for fishing or hunting.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a whole other catastrophe. It's funny because we talk about things that are exhausting. People don't realize sometimes how exhausting things are.
Oh yeah,
And that is a good example of fishing that is exhausting. Now, for example, shark fishing, it was not exhausting at all. We sat there, we ran line out, we ran some small rods to maybe catch some other bait to mess around with, which was getting eaten up by spot and crab the whole time. This is back before yanking that. But most part, we just sat back, relaxed, and talked, and just had a good time. But when you get out there and you're fishing for a fish that you're targeting, especially like a freshwater fish like that, you're throwing lures nonstop. Next thing you know, a couple hours into it, you're getting kind of tired, feet getting worn out, especially if you don't have your sea legs, from standing for a while. Yeah. And then the next thing you know, you're hours into it. And one of the best conversations I ever had was with the guy that I do go muskie fishing with, which we've probably 1,000 times today. But we were sitting there, and I was like, I just gotta take a break and sit down. And he was like, okay. And it was towards the end of the day, and I was like, man, I'm beat. I said, I feel like like pathetic. How am I so tired? I mean, I know you bring people out here all the time. And he said, oh yeah. I said, well, I mean, how many people bail out? I'm assuming here and there people bail out. He goes, oh, they don't catch fish? He says, yeah. Usually about halfway through the day.
wow.
And I was like, what is the case? Like, they'll pay for 8 hours.
And that ain't a cheap trip.
He said they don't catch fish in the first 4 hours. He said most of those people, they just give up. There's, yeah, you
Hell
can go,
no.
you go ahead and take me back. I remember the first time I went with him, it was cold. It was raining. We weren't dressed for it.
Yep.
And I was beat. And I stood out there for those 8. I remember when we drove back, I had to pull over in a parking lot and take a nap in a drive like a Denny's or something because I was going to crash my car driving home because I was so beat.
Nodding off.
You know what I mean? But I was not going to stop. There was a chance in those 8 hours to catch that fish in that window. I was going to catch a fish in that window.
Yeah.
It's funny because sometimes you're just sitting there and you're like, time's going by. You're like, I could go back soon. And that last hour, you're just like, man, I really want to, get into something. So that shit can wear you out.
And so you mentioned something I want to try to figure out. I wanted to ask your thought on this. So you said typically on the top water you like running braid with whatever, running braid because it obvious, all the time it's getting stuck. So my question is, do you run leader? And if you do, how much leader?
So I run a leader with everything when I run braid.
Okay.
And the reason that I always run a leader is because I don't like to tie things to braid.
I can understand that. I hate.
Doesn't
I
matter.
like fluorocarbon worse than I hate braid.
So I just don't. So for some reason, if I tie braid to like a swivel, it doesn't feel right to me. I don't like it. There's give in it. There's no flex to it. It's rope. It falls down straight. I like to have something that's straight in the leader. And the leader tends to be straight. So I'll run usually for something like that, where like bass fishing or whatever, I won't run a leader that's any stronger than the braid is. If we were running like some big saltwater thing we were messing around and I was running 60, I'd probably run like a 100-pound braid.
Right.
I mean, 100-pound leader.
Right.
And that's more to grab when I get next to the boat.
Sure.
So that I'm not cutting myself
Absolutely.
with braid. But I've gotten really good with my tying my knots to the line. So to me, I would much rather tie them and then I'll even glue them afterwards, make sure they stay solid because I can always wrap braid over top of a leader that's mono or whatever it is because it just clinches that much tighter.
We're gonna have to do a class on this one because I try to run leaders. Most of the time I get so pissed off because they always seem to get hung up on my rod somewhere caught in the eye or something like that. I can never make them smooth enough to go out the rod without some issue.
Well, so then you just run a short leader. So if you're having issues casting and you don't want to get in that eye, then just don't run that long of a leader. I always run swivels.
Yeah.
Well, snap swivels, but I don't want to run two. Like to me, I don't like that. So like you see a lot of guys will go ahead and attach their braid to a swivel, then the leader,
Yeah.
to the leader, to the swivel, to the snap.
Nah,
I just like to
too
have
many.
that snap swivel, and then I tie my knot really well. And if I tie it well, I can put it through. Now casting
Yeah.
out becomes a little tricky, but I have enough where I can tap it out. It's not going to be stuck.
Right.
Yeah, it's a bit of fun, just time of doing
Gotta
the
learn
knots
it.
over and over and over and over. But they fail sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think of myself as a pretty good knot tire. I like tying knots. I find that's like one of the best parts of fishing because you're getting ready to go fish, and putting, tying knots and getting them on. But snap swivels are pretty cool when sometimes you get, the bites on, you're really fishing. You're like, all right, they're hitting pretty good here. Let me try this. And you switch something up and you get better results. But all that time's fast, right?
well, there's also times you have to have them.
Yeah.
Like an inline spinner, like for some reason, especially if you're running like a big inline spinner or any inline spinner for that matter, if you don't, she's not going to perform correctly,
Right.
Because it's going to want to do that rotation as it spins. And I'm sure there's some other.
My wife's suffering from that right now. We were talking about
We were
that.
just talking about that.
So,
And you'll notice that pretty quickly.
So anyway, other than that, I think we covered a pretty good setup. I know on the intro we were going to try to figure out some fishing, get some fishing reports and things like that, but we're not quite there yet. So
The hard part with fishing reports on here is that it's such a vast
it's a big difference.
area. It's not like I said, we're not on the coast.
Right.
It's not like, hey, we're on the coast and here's what the fishing report looks like in the area. We're in an area where, elevation's completely different.
Yeah.
Water's completely different. Weather's completely different because it's such a weird climate. You know what I mean? And if you're not from this area, DMV, you could literally go from DC to 3 different states in 15 minutes. And
all the fishing's different.
And I mean, you could go from being in, the lower Potomac, damn near, at the end of the bay, almost all the way to fishing in the mountains, to the streams, all within, travel. So it's kind of hard to really do that, and then everything in between. But yeah, we will have to figure something out, keep everybody online on what's going on in the area.
Cool. Well, I think we're about ready to wrap this one up. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that we covered some stuff today. We didn't get too much into hunting.
Nah.
Did a lot of fishing today. Yet again, it's not like we go into it too much of a established idea of direction where we're going. We just discuss things, some of the stuff we discussed earlier in the week to have out there. So I want to thank everybody for listening. And if they have any ideas, comments, concerns, questions, ideas for us to talk about again, call me out on my things that I said that were incorrect. I don't know, whatever. Like I said, there were quite a few times where I make sure to say I wasn't an expert. I was guessing.
I'm the same way, though. And I'm sure people will tell us. So
yeah, feel free to comment.
yeah, please do. We enjoy it. So with that, we hope everybody's having a good one. Make sure that you're getting out there, you're getting some fishing in. Take a little one with you. That's the next generation of fisher people, and and go out and have a good time. And we hope you all have a good one.
All right.
The Hunting Quest. No matter how crazy, high-tech, or lazy the rest of the country gets, we will always be hunting and fishing. If that's you, you've found your new family. Thanks to our sponsor, Davis Guns and Gear. Thanks for listening to the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. Reach out to us by email at info@thehuntingquest.com and check us out on Instagram and YouTube at The Hunting Quest. See you next time.